But I always felt like there was this kind of, you can't enjoy yourself and do great things. You know, you're either like out there grinding up and to the right as fast and hard as you possibly can so that you can enjoy things later, or like you don't really care about your career and like you're kind of lazy and enjoying it for people that are more like that. And so I've become like really, really passionate about showing people who care about achieving that like not only can you enjoy and achieve, but actually like the more you enjoy the work towards the achievement, like the more you're going to achieve.
Hey, welcome back to another episode, Relentless Goal Achievers. And this is the Relentless Goal Achievers podcast. Today, I got a really, really interesting guest with me with a hell of a story. So you definitely want to stick around for this one. He is a multi-time founder of a few companies. He was an early employee at Airbnb, the conglomerate, before anybody even knew what it was. He was an executive at an AI company before AI was cool. Yes, before Terminator. No, I'm just kidding. Currently, he advises a $2 billion startup and scale-up portfolio. He has a brand new book out that's called Your Grass is Greener, which is pretty interesting because we've been taught the grass is always greener somewhere else, not us. And today we're going to talk about seeing our grass a little bit greener with some pretty cool tips and tricks on how to start up your business, build it, and make some cool decisions along the way. Jason Silver, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to get you to follow me around and introduce me anytime I go anywhere. It's great.
Dude, you don't want me to follow you around, man. People will walk away from you.
You never know.
Yeah. So, Jason, how did you come up on this journey? You know, you figure somebody's working at Airbnb, working in AI before it was even cool. Chances are you probably have a huge trajectory up on the growth in the company. What happened to make you walk away from that?
Interesting way to put it. You know, I think it's kind of a progression. You know, I think I'm like a type A, I think by definition. You know, I love to achieve things. I think that's been true for a really long time. But I always felt like there was this kind of common, you can't have your cake and eat it too mentality, meaning like you can't enjoy yourself and do great things. You know, you're either like out there grinding up and to the right as fast and hard as you possibly can so that you can enjoy things later, or like you don't really care about your career and like you're kind of lazy and enjoying it for people that are more like that. And so I've become like really, really passionate about showing people who care about achieving that like not only can you enjoy and achieve, but actually like the more you enjoy the work towards the achievement, like the more you're going to achieve, right? Enjoyment isn't this like fluffy thing. It's actually like the fuel for achievement. And I think I've really been on that journey. You know, that's been the through line through all the things that I'm doing. And it's just been like getting more and more and more and more and more and more focused on, you know, what is this message? How do we make it more tactical? And just kind of progress from, you know, Airbnb to AI to writing a book to like talking to you.
Man, welcome here. So I'm like 5 steps ahead of Airbnb and AI and this podcast. So what I hear you saying, I think, is that you enjoy the hunt.
You know, I like new things. You know, I'm kind of a 0 to 1 guy. You know, I Airbnb was great. I loved it there. I would never be able to make the claim that like I built Airbnb. I was part of the team, but you know, there was a lot going on. I've founded companies in my past. Like I really enjoy when there's nothing and you make something. You know, how do we figure this out? How do you get to there? I really enjoyed the process of like writing a book and getting the book out into the world. So I'm always looking for that new thing to just, where's the thing I haven't done? I don't know how to do it. It's going to make me uncomfortable. I'm sure I'm going to learn some great stuff along the way. And yeah, I guess I would say I'm kind of always on the hunt for that new confusing thing that's going to kick my ass and teach me something awesome.
Where do you think that comes from?
No idea.
You just know that's it, huh?
You know, I'm lucky. I think, you know, I was something about the way I was brought up or, you know, the genetics. Like I always have had this value in me, though I probably wasn't always able to articulate it where, you know, when everyone's looking left, like I'm just looking right. And that is sometimes great because you get to jump on an opportunity like earlier, or you do something that winds up panning out in a way people couldn't have expected. And sometimes it bites me way in the ass. It's like, would have been better to just go with the flow and go with the crowd because, there's a reason why that's the popular thing to do. But for some reason, I've just always had this thing of, great, that's working, for everybody else. Like, where's the path that isn't a path yet? Like, I want to get the machete out and hack it down.
Yeah, I got you. So now you're advising startups, and tell me a little bit about like why do people hire you? Why does a startup come to you?
Yeah, I call it startup personal training. It's something that I always wanted. I don't think about it like coaching or advising. Those words have all sorts of different connotations. The idea is like, if you go to a personal trainer in the gym, right? Sometimes you don't know how to do the exercise and they're telling you how to do it. And sometimes you're doing an exercise and they're kind of spotting you, right? Their arms are underneath yours, so you don't drop the barbell on your face and kill yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And other times they want to get a workout in too. And so they're kind of working out right next to you. And that's kind of like what I do. I've been very fortunate that, I've been able to found some companies and be in some big successes. I crashed one of my startups, so I've seen what that looks like as well. And I've just made a ton of mistakes in business and seen some wins. And so I have a pretty good pattern recognition for, helping people figure out what are they trying to accomplish? Are they aligned with their intentions? And how do I help them get aligned with their intentions? And so usually they bring me the hardest problems that they don't feel like they have an outlet for. I can't go to the board with this. It's not something I'm ready to take to my employees yet. Helping them think through those kinds of things in a very safe space where, we bash around ideas. I'm very opinionated and we kind of argue about them until the point that the path forward is hardened and clear. And then they go and take it to the next step and figure out how to execute it. So when a startup is stuck, that's usually when I get a call, either from an investor or one of the founders.
Got it. So do you find that they're usually stuck in similar kind of scenarios?
Patterns emerge, but every company's different. I think you can pull out themes like, if you don't have a great team and you don't have the right people on the right problems, it's going to be very challenging to solve the problems. But what people do you need? How do we match them to the problems? What's the right structure for people inside of your company to make sure that they're like empowered and enabled? These things are going to differ from company to company to company. And that's why the thing that I've learned is over time, I'm not the arbiter of what is good or bad inside of a company. Like, I've seen things that I think, oh, this company's going to crash, and they crushed it instead. And I've seen the flip side, where you're just like, this is obviously a no-brainer win. And a year later, the company's imploded. And so what I try to do instead is help people get really clear on the company that they want to build and how they want to build it. And I help them see when they're actually building in a way that is like divergent from what they said they wanted. Right. And that's where I think you really remove regret. Win, lose, or draw, you want to do it your way. Right. And you don't want to wind up in a position where it's like, I tried to build this company like somebody else. It turned into not my company and it crashed on me. I always felt like if I'm going to go down swinging, I'm going to do it. I'm going to swing the bat as hard as I possibly can. And I'm going to try to do it to the best of my ability, my way. And that's going to make things work out or not, but I'll be proud of it, one way or the other.
Yeah. Okay. So if there's somebody thinking about starting a company, could you lay out kind of the yellow brick road of, to maximize their opportunity for success? Like, what should be step 1, 2, give me the first 5 if you can.
Yeah.
Give me the first 17 steps.
Yeah, that's right. If I had this, I'd be in a different spot. Like, most common misconception is like, it's going to be way more painful than you think. It's going to take way longer than you think. And, I think a common thing I'll see at the earliest stages is basically like over-investing, right? So trying to think about, how can I test the core hypotheses of my business as quickly and cheaply as I possibly can? And the best way that I've seen to do this is to basically find ways to prove yourself wrong as fast as you can. Because if you want to be a startup founder, you have to like believe in yourself a ton, which means that it's really easy to convince yourself that you're right, even when you might not be. And that's a strength. And you're going to need that because people are going to tell you, you're wrong. This can't exist. This is a terrible idea. You stink. Why are you doing this? Yada, 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 yada. And you got to have some kind of reality distortion field to say, yeah, I hear you, but like, I'm going anyway. The challenge with that is there are certainly things that are wrong with your idea, they're wrong with your business model. You just don't know what they are yet. And so, to use one of your words earlier, like if you can go on the hunt for the ways in which you're wrong as quickly as possible and find them and tweak them and change them, you'll be off to the races way more quickly. So thinking about like, this is my business idea, right? I want to sell, lemonade on the corner of my street. Well, what are the core assumptions? I have to be able to make lemonade. I have to be able to sell lemonade for more than I can make it, right? Which means that there have to be people who are going to buy it. Okay, what's the fastest possible way I can disprove those things? Can I actually make lemonade? What's the fastest way I can try to make lemonade, right? I'm going to go into the kitchen, whip up some lemonade, give it to my wife or whoever and be like, taste this. I'm like, dude, this sucks. Oh shit, I can't make lemonade. Like we better take a step back, because if I can't do that, we're in trouble. And then you make the lemonade, that's great. Are there people there to buy it? You don't have to sell $1 million worth of business in your first year. Like, will somebody spend any money on the problem that you're solving with the solution that you have? If they will, great. Once we get back past that, we start thinking about how to scale and how to get more efficient. So really looking for like breaking down the simplest version of these are the core hypotheses, and then come up with a way to disprove yourself on all of them. And it's not usually done because we're afraid of it. Nobody wants to see that their idea sucks. But what you're trying to do is figure out the ways in which it's broken as fast as possible, not so you can give up on the business, but so you can fix it as fast as possible.
So in something a little more complex than, lemonade.
Let's take Airbnb as an example.
Okay? Let's take Airbnb, yeah.
Do you know how Airbnb started?
No, I have no idea.
Okay, Airbnb started because there was a design conference in San Francisco, and every time the design conference happens, the hotel's overbooked and no one can come and stay. Okay, so two of the founders of Airbnb are designers. And they're like, well, okay, we could do with some money. We're going to rent space on our floor during this design conference and see what happens. Super simple test, right? I mean, of course, there was a lot of like things that they need to build and do and what have you, but they didn't start by saying, we're going to get people to rent out their houses globally around the world, and that's going to be amazing. It was like, can we rent out an airbed on our floor during this San Francisco design conference? Oh, look at that. We filled up. That's great. Like, now what's the next step, right? Well, can we do this outside of our house, in other people's houses? Can we do it outside of San Francisco? Can we, and you build and you build and you build from there, constantly testing the smallest, most important hypothesis along the way.
That is such a great example. And as you're talking about it, when you go to a football game, I grew up in Baltimore. I'm now down in Sarasota, not too far from Tampa. When we go to the stadium, the lots at the stadium suck. Was that?
I'm a huge Bucks fan, by the way.
Are you really?
Yeah, my whole life.
Okay, cool. I'm still a Ravens fan. Unfortunately, we're not doing too well this year, but I got hope. But so the people who are renting out the grass, their lawns is parking space at 20, 25, $30 is, the closer you are to the stadium. That's exactly what this reminds me of. This is so cool.
Yeah.
They could potentially have a huge business, a huge parking business on their hands.
Yeah. Look at another great example. Okay. Everyone knows ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
I think it's one of, if not the fastest growing internet application ever. Okay. So they built all this stuff on the back end, and it was going so well. And they thought, oh, you know what we want to do? Like, we want to charge for this. Okay. So option one is go and build a big financial system and integrate all the various bits and pieces and spend like months doing that. Option two, Google form, telling them that you actually want to pay and would commit to $20. That's what I got from them in the very early days of ChatGPT being a thing. And you'd think this is a multi-billion-dollar company. They're sending me a Google form, right? That's not stupid. That's smart, right? The first question is, are people going to pay for this? What's the cheapest, fastest way we can test it? And very quickly, demand filled up. And they knew that building this feature with obviously a lot more rigor would be beneficial for them. They spent zero time working on the wrong thing there.
So did they limit access to it on purpose? Like, did they kind of control the supply to it? Because that was the difference, right?
ChatGPT, you mean?
Yeah, with ChatGPT when they first came out, sometimes you would log in and you get access, and other times they would just say, hey, there's too many people on ChatGPT, we can't do it.
That's right.
But if you want to pay the $20, you'll have, faster access.
That's right. But before you could just put your credit card in for the $20, like I remember when it first came out, I got a Google form where I just clicked and said like, yeah, I want to pay $20 for this. Let's go. And I just put in my email address, clicked the thing that said yes. It fired off an email to them. I got an auto email back saying, we're working through this. And that was that, right? And like that probably took them, I don't know, 8 minutes to set up, and what they got was a list of however many people who were ready right then and there to pay for a thing, and they went and built it. And so I don't work there, so I can't tell you like exactly how they went through the logic. But to me, that's an example of the logic at play. Is I think we tend to make assumptions that like these big shiny companies are doing these incredible things way beyond. Like what I did right before Airbnb was I founded 2 of my own companies and I crashed one of them right before joining Airbnb. And I got to Airbnb all nervous of like, oh boy, like, it was early, but there were like a couple hundred people there, like much bigger than what I was used to at the time. My company was like tens of people. What was shocking to me was like, this company is operating just like my company where we were duct tape and chewing gumming. Like you didn't, it looked great from your perspective on the other side of our product, but in the back end, it was just like holding this thing all together. And a bigger company was doing very similar things. It's just we're so laser focused on, well, what matters most? Like we're trying to grow this metric. Let's put all the energy there. And I think
love that.
sometimes, we just get a little bit worried that like, what are people going to think? They're going to judge. They're going to this. They're going to that. Better to know that there's something wrong with your business model as soon as possible, because that gives you the maximum amount of time to solve it. Right. And I think the way that we tend to work more conventionally, because my experiences were scared and I felt that fear before, is we do all the smaller things first that are more likely to be successful. And we leave that big, scary, mission crippling test until right at the end. And when you do it last, you have the least amount of time to solve it. So better to bring it right up to the front and say like, if I can't make that lemonade, if I can't rent out the space on my floor, if no one wants to pay for a ChatGPT, the business model's broken and there's no point doing anything else. Test that first. Figure out whatever your version of that thing is and test it like right now. You can do it cheaply. You just got to find the right way and get that information as quickly as you can.
Yeah. And by the way, not all of you listening and watching our show have your own business or a startup or you're an entrepreneur. And this principle, I feel like, goes so well with anybody's life. Find out what your problem is, become aware of it, and attack it very quickly because you'll have the most amount of time to solve it. I think what most people do is they put their, they do the ostrich move, right? Head in the sand, pretend it doesn't exist and it'll go away on its own, but it won't. Every single day that you drink that 35-ounce orange mocha frappuccino with 148 grams of sugar in it, that's not going to get you closer to the goal.
That's a big drink.
That's a big drink. Yeah.
That's a big drink.
I may have added a few ounces to it.
It's just what we're doing there is we're just delaying the fear, the pain. We just don't realize it. It's like I'm delaying the pain and the future pain is going to be way worse. But because it's in the future, I delay it. And what I'm saying is just like bring the pain, in a smaller dose. In a smaller dose. It's not going to be as painful. Like I said, I've crashed a company before and it really sucked. And a big lesson for me was it was not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
So talk to me about sorry about that. Talk to me about the company you crashed. I'm really curious about that. What was the idea? What did you do? And then why did it crash?
Listen, businesses crash for so many different reasons, but we basically spun it out of my first business. And what we were trying to do is we were trying to help small businesses cross promote for each other. Right. So imagine you're like a mom and pop shop somewhere in the neighborhood. You have a very limited marketing budget, but you're a yoga studio and there's like a juice place like a couple doors down. And so on your own, the two of you maybe don't have a large social media reach, but together you have an opportunity to do some really incredible cross promotions. Yeah. But as a small business owner, I'm very busy. I don't have a lot of time for social media. I don't have a lot of time to go and build a partnership. And so we built this platform that basically solved this problem for them. And the problem, in my opinion, was we were ahead of the market. we did this at a time when advertising online, doing email marketing, the value of social media for a smaller business, this was a long time ago, like wasn't as clear to people. So it wasn't on top of their priority list. So we were solving like problem number 2 or 3 when the market was still on problem number 1. And so I could have used a lot of that experience is what's fueling like my passion for explaining this point to you now is we could have run some tests earlier, I think, to try to figure this stuff out. But one of the things that I'm, most proud about is, yes, I crashed a business. It was really hard. We had raised money, the team, like it honestly did cripple my confidence in a massive way. I thought my career was done. And one of my investors whose money I almost entirely lost is the person who introduced me to Airbnb, right? Thought enough about me, despite the fact that I lost their investment, most of their investment, still thought enough about me to say, Jay's a good guy. He worked as hard as he could. It just didn't work out. Hey, Jay, there's this team I know of. I think that they're doing some things you might be interested in. Why don't you go and have a chat? And that was a moment where I was just like, yeah, it matters how I work, right? I don't control the outcome. And I really spend so much time focused on like, how am I working day to day? To me, that's what matters, because some outcomes we hit, some outcomes we don't. You can do everything in quotations right, and you don't get the outcome you want. You can do everything in quotations wrong and luck into the outcome that you want. We don't control the outcome. We control the process, the journey there. And I really, really try to focus my energy there. And that's why I'm so fired up that the book came out and spent the time on the book. Like that's, for me, it's kind of the culmination of that thinking and trying to share that with other folks, because it's unconventional, right? We're taught to think about how much money do you make? What's that promotion? What's your job title? Like, what did you accomplish? Did you reach the top of the mountain?
Yeah.
No point getting to the top of the mountain if you hated your life the whole way up and back down.
Yeah. So this is interesting because I work with quite a few entrepreneurs, and when you're building something, there's probably 100 different tasks that need to get accomplished to get to that vision. So you have to be able to discern what's important, prioritize, and be very decisive. And by the way, before I ask the question to Jason, be sure that you click on the link somewhere below in the description, because Jason gifted us a download of how to make a decision. It's a step-by-step process. So if you feel yourself being stuck in what to do next, how to decide on A or B, this is a really cool downloadable PDF. You can find it in our arsenal, and the link is below. But Jason, how do you decide, like, on, because one of the things I heard you say is intense focus on that one thing until you solve for it, and then you move on. But as an entrepreneur, there's never just one thing. There's like 30 things in an hour that need to get done. What's your process for deciding, or how do you coach people to decide?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of 2 things here that you're asking, and you can point me in whatever direction you want. And like both of these are like straight out of the book, basically. And one is like, how do we prioritize? Mm-hmm. Right. So that's prioritization is a subset of decision making, right? So 100%. How do we prioritize? We could talk about that for sure. It's a major challenge. How do I make sure that I get the things I need to get done every week? How do I decide what's the most important? Yada, yada, yada. And the second aspect there is, how do I make great decisions in general? So choose your own adventure. You want to go the specific flavor of like, let's talk prioritization.
Make a great decision.
Okay. So decision making. This is one that I'm like a massive nerd about. So the way I structured the book is all about how to enjoy your job more without changing the work that you need to do. That's like the key piece is, you talk to anybody, you say you should enjoy it more. Like, I'm too busy for that. I have to get these things done. And what I'm trying to show people is, great. I'm not saying don't change the things you have to get done or don't do those things anymore. I'm saying I can show you a better way to do the things you already have to do so you enjoy it more and you do better at them. Okay, and so one of the like primary things here is this idea of decision making. For some reason, it's just not taught. I've never taken a class on it. It doesn't show up in elementary school. If you get a job, it's rare that someone's going to teach you decision making. We just assume that we're going to get better at it. And actually, like, the human brain kind of stinks at decision making. That's the challenge. Is like, I could show you, there's something like 180 cognitive biases. Like, you can't stop those from happening. They just happen. I was reading a study not that long ago. I'm going to butcher the details of it, but people think that one decision that they make very carefully is who they're going to vote for in an election, right? Election coming up in the US. This is what people think. Okay. So they ran this study that goes something like this. There's an election coming up in one country, and people are going to vote for it, and we're going to see who's going to win. And then they take 5-year-old kids from another country that speaks a different language, okay, and they just show them pictures and say, which one of these people do you like more, person A or person B? And the 5-year-old kids just pick. I liked person A, I like person B. They don't know anything else. They just picture. Okay? They predicted with incredible accuracy who won the elections. So what does that tell us? That tells us that either these kids are incredible prophesizers, or there's a cognitive bias at play where you think you're being very reasoned and articulate about how I'm going to pick this candidate, and you're looking at all their policies and listening to this and that. What's actually happening in your brain is your brain is saying, which one of these looks more trustworthy? Which one of these people do I like the look of best? And we don't want to admit that because, like, I don't feel like that's what's happening in my head. I'm thinking it through and I'm working my way through it. But you take this thing that, like, yep, first impressions mean a big thing. I'm judging somebody in the time it takes me to blink my eye. And then confirmation bias is my brain doing this trick of, oh, Eric looks trustworthy, therefore I think he's probably good at his job. And then I'm going to find all the reasons why I'm going to, like, confirm that initial incoming belief. And so if you take a second to realize that, like, your brain's a bit of a machine and you can't exactly predict the way it's going to work, what you can control is the process you want to take to maximize your chance of making the best decision that you can. So that's kind of like step one, is just recognizing that no matter how smart you think you are, decision making is a hard thing. It's not just about being rational.
Yeah. So
Okay.
what's the process that you take?
So the process is to have a process. And so what I call it is like a thought routine. And we talk about this in the book. Sounds like a weird concept. Okay, what's a routine? A routine is like a repeatable thing you do to get a job done. What's an example of that? Most of us walk in the front door, we take our car keys, and we put them in the same place we always put them. Maybe you have a bowl or a hook. Like, why do you do that? That's your routine so you don't lose your car keys, right? If you just throw them wherever around the house, you're always trying to figure out where the heck are my dang car keys.
Right.
Okay, so that's a routine. What's a thought routine? A thought routine is a mental process that you go through to help you make the best decisions. You've probably done this a million times, you just don't realize it. You've probably used pros and cons before. It is the most common thinking routine for making decisions. You make a list of pros, you make a list of cons, then you make a decision.
Sure.
Okay, I'll tell you a problem with that. You've obviously heard of Apple before, I assume, so you know who Steve Jobs is. You've probably heard of Disney, right? So you may not know who Bob Iger is. He's and was the CEO of Disney a long time ago. Steve Jobs also was the CEO of Pixar many, many years ago. Mm-hmm. And Disney was going to buy Pixar. They were thinking about it. So Steve Jobs and Bob Iger, they get in a room and they go and do pros and cons, right? They write down all of the pros of Disney buying Pixar and all of the cons. And when they finished, there were like 2 or 3 pros and like 57 cons. And Bob Iger goes, well, I guess that's it. And Steve Jobs said something to the effect of, hang on a second. That's not how I'm seeing this. Like, one amazing pro can outweigh any number of cons. And the mistake Bob Iger was making, it wasn't his fault, but like the mistake he was making is he was taking a complicated acquisition decision, and his mind, without him knowing it, was boiling it down to, are there more pros than cons? Which kind of is irrelevant. That's what Jobs was saying. Anyway, Disney buys Pixar. It's a massive success, like one of the best acquisitions they've ever had. And so what we want to do is we want to throw out pros and cons. And so the approach I like to tell people is I call it the factors thought routine. It's relatively simple. Step 1, list out all the factors that you want to use to make this decision. So,
give me an example of a factor.
An example of a factor would be the number of pros versus cons. I would not recommend that you use that as a factor.
So the thing you said don't use, that's a factor to use.
I would not recommend that you use that, but that would be an example of a factor from that story.
Got
Another
it.
factor might be how much the cost is, right?
Got it.
I want to take the cheapest approach. Another factor might be how long is it going to take? Another factor might be the amount of revenue. Another factor might be how much I'm going to enjoy it. Like, these are the the attributes that you're going to decide by.
Fair.
So,
Okay.
if let's say you had unlimited money and I was taking you to buy a car and you weren't thinking about money, the fact that like a Honda Civic is cheaper than a Ferrari shouldn't factor in for you because you don't care about money. And we often fall into these traps of making decisions based on factors that we don't actually care about because we haven't articulated the factors we do care about upfront.
Oh,
So
that's so good.
you start by listing the factors: time, money, whatever else it might be. Usually there are 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, not too many more than that.
Preferably ones you care about.
You're specifically going to pick the factors that you care about for
Right.
this decision.
Okay.
So let's make this a little bit more tangible. Okay.
Sure.
So Eric is thinking about taking a new job. So the decision is stay where I am or go to the new job. So what factors might Eric be thinking about?
Money,
how much
freedom.
money is he going to make?
Yep.
What's his freedom going to look like? What else might
Right.
he have?
Opportunity for growth.
Okay.
First of
Let's
all,
just-
Eric vowed that he'll never take a job. So let's just throw that out there. So I'm like, man, this is tough. But what
Let's
if,
just-
so
let's
this makes
use
it
those-
good, right? Because now like, well, what would have to be present for me to say, yeah, I will take that job, right?
That's
'Cause never say
the
never.
statement. That's exactly the statement I'm looking for. Okay, so what you don't want to do is say, okay, so you said money, you said opportunity for growth, and you said freedom.
Yep.
So probably what you wouldn't want to do is you wouldn't want someone to come along and say, we're going to make you the global CEO. And you're just like, oh boy, that's a fun title. Like that would really
Lot of
look good
growth.
that would look great on my resume.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you didn't list that as a factor, so I don't know why we're talking about it because
Right.
it's going to crush your freedom, right? And it's not something that you generally want to do. So if we just were to pick your 3 and go back to the like way to walk through the decision making, so you
Wait, let me time out. If anybody's listening here who wants to make me a global CEO, I'll consider it. Just leave me a comment.
Well, we're about to tell them exactly what they need
Yeah.
to offer you.
Yes,
in,
let's do
in
this.
order to make sure that you take the job. Okay.
There you go.
So you start by listing out the factors that you care about. And usually the first thing that we do is we just start thinking about the pros and cons and which one's going to be better. I'm saying take a break on that for a second and list out the factors that you think matter to you. In your case, we had 3. Okay. When that's done, this is the algorithm you're going to use. And this comes from like a ton of, behavioral science. And like, it's quite backed by a guy named Daniel Kahneman.
I know Daniel Kahneman,
Yeah,
psychiatrist.
That's right. One of the like fathers of how to think about this kind of stuff. And he ran some interesting tests, which we can talk about, but we'll keep it tactical for now.
Yeah.
What you're going to do is you're going to walk through each factor and you're going to make a mini decision as if that factor was the only factor to think about. Say you're going to start with the first factor you mentioned, which was money.
Yeah.
Okay. If all I was thinking about money, I don't get to think about my freedom. I don't get to think about opportunity for growth. I'm just saying which one of these is the right choice based on money alone.
Yep.
So, okay, the new job is going to pay me more money. Great. The answer to this one is if I was just thinking about money alone, I'd take the new job. Then you go to the next factor, freedom. The new job, I'm going to have to work triple the hours. And the boss seems like he's going to be like really a bit of a hard person to work for. So like I would stay where I am if it was only about freedom. Great.
Unless it's the global CEO position where I'm the boss.
Exactly. And then we go down to the last one, which was, what did we say? You had opportunities for growth.
Opportunity for growth. Yeah.
Okay. And so the opportunities for growth are better in the new position. If I was only thinking about opportunities for growth, I would go there.
Yeah. I'd probably start thinking about impact too. All right. But anyway, I get the point.
That's why you're probably going to have a list that's bigger than 3, but just because I won't be able to remember them all right now, like we'll just.
Sure. You did great so far.
Right. So you get those 3. And then when that's done, you step back and you make a decision considering all the factors together. And the most common thing we try to do here is, if you remember, we went over the 3 and we had 2 for the new job and 1 for the existing job, right? The new job was better for money and it was better for opportunities for growth. The current job was better for your freedom. The common approach here is to add them up, 2 and 1. And because 2 is bigger than 1, we're going to go to the new job. But this is the like cognitive bias at work. You did not tell me that a factor was which factors are more. The only reason we're stepping through the factors one by one by one is because Daniel Kahneman showed us that when you do this, it primes your brain to be more analytical. So that when you think about what decision is right, you have all the context considering each factor on its own. That's it.
Yeah. Except for when I did my values personally, freedom is the number one value. So like freedom outweighs the other two.
Exactly right. So there you
which
go.
is pretty cool.
So in your case, you're going to look at all three and you're going to say, I'm looking
Yeah.
at this, even
Not
though
going.
it's 2-1, the right decision, and you're just going to trust that decision.
Yeah, and either way, I'm making a decision. I'm not putting my head in the sand. I'm working at it. I brought the problem up. I like it, man, because usually I'm like fire. What's it called? Fire, aim, shoot, or
Ready, aim.
fire. Yeah, ready, fire, aim.
Yeah,
that's me.
And I'm all for that, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that this model is fits perfectly there in that this is just the ready stage, right? The ready stage is what are the factors, right? What are my options? Walk through the factors one factor at a time, make the decision overall, fire, figure out what happened, aim again, and repeat.
Yeah, my wife's listening to it. She's probably going to say, you are fire, ready, aim. I'm quick to decide because what I realize is, and this is not a good thing to do when you're running a business. So since then, I've slowed down my decision making. I've kind of outsourced it to my wife, who's takes her time when she's making a decision. But what I realized is that you don't know if your decision is the right decision or not. I don't care how much analytics and stuff like that. So the best thing to do is just take that step, and then you're going to crash. But now you can fix it, but you're so far ahead than just sitting and analyzing and deciding and then taking a step, realizing it was the wrong decision. So anyway,
I'll add like one small tidbit for you to consider in your mental model there, because I largely agree with it. You know, when I think about good decision, bad decision, I think about like on purpose or not. Right. I think a lot of times what poker players call this is they call it resulting. You judge the decision based on the outcome, which in my opinion is not the right way to do it.
I agree.
I could walk you up to a cliff and give you a coin, and I could say like, you're going to flip a coin, heads you jump, tails you don't. Right. You would never call that a good decision. Right. Yeah. You could flip a coin and you're going to be right sometimes, but that's not a good decision. It might be a good outcome. And so then the question is like, well, how do you judge decision making in its own right if we're not going to think about the outcome? And I run workshops with startups where I help them make better decisions. And this is like one of the first things we go over. And when I ask people what makes a great decision, everyone kind of like, I've never thought about that. You know, when they come up with an idea, and I give them the coin toss example, and they're like, "Oh, dang it, yeah, that doesn't work." So what I do is I think about like, this is like a Bezos model, like regret minimization. Okay, why would I regret a decision? I'm going to regret a decision if there's something I could have known and didn't at the time of making the decision. I'm not going to regret a decision that I thought through well enough, made an informed choice on, and then learned after the fact that I didn't know something. And in hindsight, I would have made a different decision. That's called learning. Like you can't avoid that stuff. It's actually the best for you. But what I want to avoid is I should have known this at the time. I could have known this. If I had just tested my lemonade or tested the airbed on the floor or tested the demand for, paying for ChatGPT, I could have known this. This was knowable information. I just chose not to. That's what I really try to avoid. And so I don't want to make decisions for pros and cons reasons that aren't aligned with the factors I'm choosing. That's why I developed this model of it helps me make sure that I make the best decision possible, meaning later on I can look back and say, that was the right decision at the time. I then learned some stuff afterwards, and then I could make a better decision going forward and going forward and going forward from there. And that's the thing I'm really trying to remove. It's just like, have you thought about the things you can think about, and have you reduced your bias as much as you possibly can?
Yeah, it reminds me of, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'm spending the first 5 sharpening the axe. Yeah.
Similar idea, and what I found is the first couple times you use my framework, it takes you a little bit longer. By the third or fourth or fifth time, I do it in my head now. Like it's quick. If I have a decision to make, I naturally think about the factors. I quickly run through it in my head and I arrive at a conclusion, and it does not take long. It's certainly not longer than writing down the pros and writing down the cons and then trying to come up with a decision that way.
Yeah.
It's going to lead to a better outcome. And in most cases, it will wind up being faster than that as well.
How does fear play into your decision making?
That's up to you. I think that's up to people. And
Now, I'm asking you specifically, how does fear play into your decision making?
personally,
Yeah.
so again, maybe I'm a bit of a, I don't know, like nerd over this kind of stuff, but I will write down like emotions. And I make a very conscious decision that if a reason not to do something is fear, then I'm doing it. Like fear is not a reason to hold me back. And so I will consciously write that down. And when I use my framework, what I wind up with is like option A is the best. And the only reason I'm holding back right now is because I'm scared, which I am regularly. Right? I'm scared I'm going to write a book and no one's going to read it. They're going to think it's a pile of crap. I'm scared I'm going to hop on a podcast and like, I'm not going to know what to say, or the host won't like it, or no one's going to listen to it, and on and on and on and on and on. But because I take the time up front to kind of list it all out, I can see that it's fear that's holding me back. And I've just made the decision in my life that fear is not enough of a reason. I mean, of course, things like fear of bodily harm and death and like,
sure,
those are different. That's a risk reward kind of a thing. But
yeah,
it's easier for me to kind of break down and say, yeah, I'm scared of this thing, but I can look at it and see it. And because I have this value where I'm just like, fear won't be the one thing in my way, I just kind of recognize the fear and let's go. And that's not to say that I just evaporate the fear. Like I'm petrified of a thing that's scary. It's just, here we go. Like we're going to see what happens. It's not going to be the thing that stands in the way.
There's a principle in personal growth that you make a decision early and just manage that decision daily. And so it sounds like you've made a decision early on that you're not going to allow fear, unless there's bodily harm or death or something, you're not going to allow just regular fear to stop you from moving forward. It's no different than like getting married and deciding that, you're going to be faithful to your wife, that you're going to be a certain type of father, that you're not going to do crack, right? Like some of us have made those decisions and we're sticking to them, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, we already do it, but for some reason, most people don't do it with fear. And I really commend you for doing that. That's great.
Fear is a great indicator. I like, for me, fear is a great way to check and see, have I checked the boxes I can check? If I'm sitting looking at a decision, I'm like, I'm scared of this. And I run through my framework. I'm still really, really scared of this. Usually that's an indication that like I've missed an angle, and that's when I'll take the decision and I'll go over to Eric and I'll say, hey man, I'm thinking about making this decision, and here are the factors I'm thinking about. What have I not thought about that you might consider? And I'm not asking you what decision would you make, because that's going to bias me. I don't want to know. You're not me. But I want you to look at this new job thing. If we were to reverse the roles, right? You're going to make this new job choice. You bring me your decision and you say, here are the 3 factors I'm thinking about. What am I missing? Right? I can then look at that and say, you haven't really thought about your commute. And I know that you really don't like commuting. And that might be a factor that matters to you. Do you think that would matter? You're like, I didn't think about the commute. I didn't tell you what decision I would make. I didn't tell you what decision I think you should make. I just told you I'd be thinking about the commute here. I think that's important. Then you write it down as a factor. You treat it just like all the other ones. And now your decision is instantly, better. And so for me, when I'm feeling fear that I just can't get past, that's usually a signal that like, there's something here that my brain is trying to tell me I've not thought about enough. And I try to whittle it down to just the fear of something new. And that's when I know, okay, this is the one that's not going to get in my way. Let's roll. But I usually feel more comfortable doing that because of the preparation. I've poked at it from many different angles. I've had other eyeballs on it. I'm like, I've thought about what I can think about. It's time to roll the dice and see what happens.
Oh man, I love that. This is probably the longest conversation I've ever had on decision making, and I'm really enjoying it
all day long, every day. Like it's 2 chapters in the book, because I just think it's such a shame. I went through a period in my life where I was just reading a ton. Like I can't remember, but I would read a book and write a what's it called, like a book report about it, just to kind of keep it in my head. And I look back recently, and I've got like hundreds of these things. And I got very interested in decision making and behavioral psychology and neuroscience and all this kind of stuff. And it made me realize, like, I've never thought much about decision making. And yet it is probably one of the most central contributors to like success in general. Everything 100%. We do is a decision. Yeah. And yet nobody is teaching. And the science is out there. It's great. But who's going to take the time to read it all? I really have been trying to like distill down what I've learned to, here's a 3-step process. it's simple for me to tell you and easy for you to go through. And it took me like 5 years to figure out like how do you kind of jam in all these bits and pieces. But I'm a huge nerd about it. I think it is a huge contributor to success. And I think a lot of companies get it wrong and a lot of people get it wrong with all of the best intentions. We just
That's
don't
really
know a
cool.
lot of the information that's out there on it.
That's really cool. Jason, tell me about the book. Like, what made you want to write the book?
The book, the backstory of the book is unfortunately a bit of a sadder story. You know, I was at the last company. I was at the AI company. We had raised a lot of money. We were growing very quickly. We were hiring people like crazy. And I got a phone call one day from my sister. My parents were away on vacation, and my sister called me from the hospital. She had gone to like a regular checkup. Out of left field, the doctor was like, I think you need to go and get a scan like relatively quickly. She went into Emerge. She wasn't sure what was going on. And, you know, you fast forward a little bit, she had very late stage, very aggressive cancer.
Oh man.
And she, over the next little bit less than a year, you know, fought like crazy and eventually lost the fight. And that whole period in my life was a period of like, I had one young son. I had a lot of people that depended on me at work. We were building a company. I had all this stuff going on in my life. And I was just like, I didn't know what to do about it, but I knew that what I was doing wasn't working. Like I was crashing, you know, it was just the weight of everything was too hard. I could tell if I stay on this path, it's not going to go to a good place. And that is what opened my eyes up out of pure necessity to just, I need to find ways to cope and handle. I wasn't thinking about writing a book. It was just like, I need to take care of myself somehow. And so I entered this like deep experimentation period where I tried everything. Like if something somewhere said, this is going to make you feel better or do better, I ran an experiment and I tried it. You know, I started doing therapy. I thought therapy was for weak people that can't handle their problems. I was very wrong about that. It was a very arrogant way to look at it. I started meditating. I was intermittent fasting. I was doing polyphasic sleep. I was setting more goals, no goals, only goals, like work late, work evenings, 4-day weeks, 7-day weeks, like all over the place. I was tweaking and tinkering with everything.
What were you trying to fix?
Me.
What was wrong? Like, what were the symptoms? Like, what was the matter? I mean,
uh,
losing your sister to cancer is a pretty traumatic experience.
like it's a tough like to pinpoint it down to one thing, but like I was unhappy and ineffective. And I think it caused me to call into question this model I had. You know, I learned that I was over invested in the future and under invested in the moment. And what I
Do
mean
you
by
think
that,
it's possible to be happy in that moment?
uh, happy, sure. I think it's possible to be happy in that moment. Would you describe yourself as happy over time? Maybe not. Um, but you know, I certainly learned a lot from that experience. And I struggled with a lot of guilt coming out the other end of it, where I can stand here and tell you with total confidence that I have never been happier, which doesn't mean I'm happy all the time. But overall, I've never been happier. I've never felt in like a more enjoyable, centered space in my life. I've never been more productive than I am right now with a unit of my time. I've never felt that my life is as good as it is right now at any other point in my life. And for a long time, I felt a ton of guilt that how can it be true that my life is better now than when my sister was alive? I
Mm.
struggled with that a ton. And what I learned is I would trade everything I've learned to bring her back if I could, but we don't live in that universe, so I can't. And what I'm left with is I have a deeply seated passion now to share the learnings as much as I can because the only silver lining I can see in the situation is my sister's not here, but I learned how to better live my own life. And the learnings that I got out of that, I can share. And if I can do those things, it's like the greatest way I can pay tribute to the life that she lived. And so it's hard. It's hard to talk about it sometimes, but you know, it's important.
What do you think are the things that are keeping you like? What do you think are the things that are making this the best time of your life right now? What's causing that?
Yeah, someone could read the book and they'll get a good sense of it. But like I said, I feel I'm so much more intentional now about moments over milestones.
Mm.
I was so focused on milestones. I'm going to accomplish this thing. We're going to sell this company. I'm going to make a whack load of money. And then my life's going to be amazing. And I'm doing it for my family. Meanwhile, what do my moments look like? Crazy hours, stressed out all the time, worried about this, worried about that.
Definitely
It's
not
not,
family.
yeah. But I would have always said to you, and I've always said this, that like family is the most important thing for me. And what I
Yeah.
meant by that is if I'm in a meeting for work and the doctor calls me with something for one of my kids, I'm going to pick up the phone. It's more important in that moment. But what I wasn't thinking about is, you know, how am I choosing to live my life? How does my work fit into the life? Like, how am I showing up for people in my life? If I'm giving 99% of myself to my job, I'm leaving a very 1% sliver for my family. Like, is that actually me prioritizing my family?
Mm.
And like I said, that's what I learned is I was completely over invested in the future. And I see a lot of people, not to like judge, but a lot of people have that mentality. And that's why what I try to help people with, like we talked about with the startup thing, is it's not for me to tell you whether over investing in your future is right, wrong, or otherwise. It's for you to tell yourself on purpose. But often when I poke people, it's like we just haven't thought that through as deeply as we have. And this visceral experience I had where my sister didn't make it to her 40th birthday. How many people think I'm going to get to retirement? That's when I'm going to travel and enjoy my life. Meanwhile, they get there and there's some major health problem, or God forbid they pass away, or someone close to them pass away. And like, you just can't enjoy retirement in the same way. Right. And it's the same kind of idea with money where like, of course, you're not going to like invest every dollar in the future because then you're going to be destitute in the moment. You can't feed yourself. And I'm not saying you should take all of your money and spend it right now and just have a massive party and have nothing for later. But at least for myself personally, I was fully investing in my happiness in the future, fully investing in my enjoyment in the future. And I want to show people with this book that, hey, you don't have to change your work. You don't have to change the way that you're trying to, the achievements that you want to have in your life. If you tweak them just a little bit, if you change the way that you're approaching them, you can enjoy it so much more along the way, right? How much sweeter is the mountain climb when you enjoy the process of climbing the mountain, not just constantly being like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
So much sweeter. Man, guys, if you are convinced that decision making is something that we've been neglecting and you need help with that, definitely hit up the link below for the arsenal. Download Jason's gift to you absolutely free and try that out. I'm definitely going to do that next time I'm making a big decision. Jason, is there anything that you wanted me to ask you that I did not?
That was one of my favorite questions. No, I mean, I would love to tell people where they can find the book, if that's okay.
100%. And by the way, all the links for Jason are going to be on the bottom in the description. Sorry, I did not mention that, but yeah, sure, go ahead for
So
Audible.
people can check out the book at yourgrassisgreener.com. I'd love folks to go and have a look. And I think, we've talked about it a bit, but it is really kind of pushing this idea of, I want people to know, that would be the thing I wanted to ask. Like, I want people to know that like they're good. We're fed this ideology that like, if you want to improve in your job, you have to go and do a huge amount of professional development. You have to build some crazy new skill. You have to get some impressive new job. And I just want people to see that there's another way, right? Those things are great. I'm not saying they're not great. I'm not saying we shouldn't strive for those things, but they're not the only things. And I think it's just kind of missing there where like, I believe that you can do a lot more than you think you can with the skills you already have, the work you already have to do. You just got to just tweak it a little bit. And because
So good.
we spend so much time at work, the more you're enjoying your job, the more you're going to enjoy your life. And that whole thing is just going to be a big, crazy flywheel that 5 years ago me would have laughed at me if I heard myself talking about this stuff now. But I'm proud that I am, and I hope people check out the book, and I can't wait to hear what they think.
Yeah, go check out Jason's book. Jason, thank you so much for being here, man. You came, you over-delivered. Loved our conversation, and I look forward to our next call. If you like my shirt, I'm going to have a link below to the Goal Guide shop, And there's some really cool designs, all designed by Julia, my amazing wife and business partner, and all about goals and relentless goal achieving and fun stuff like that. And I'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in.